He remembered death as the smell of something familiar in an unfamiliar place. Somewhere there, beyond the veil of the first infant months, there had been something else. Another world, another body, another life long, lived to the end. Finished quietly and without any special meaning. An office, a screen, rain outside the window, then darkness. Then this world. He did not remember his past name. He remembered only the way of thinking. That turned out to be more important than everything else. They named him Kyre. His mother, a thin woman with hands roughened by work in the field, and eyes that once probably knew how to laugh, pronounced this name over him on the first day and cried, not from joy. Simply because one more person had been born into this world, and this person was destined to live through the same thing she had lived through. His father's name was Cern. Broad-shouldered, silent, with that special tiredness in the body that accumulates not over years but over generations. He worked in Count Waldor's fields from dawn to sunset 6 days out of 7. The 7th day was a day off, but even on the day off, it was necessary to repair tools, patch the roof, prepare for the next week. There were 2 sisters. Lyra, 4 years older than Kyre, quiet and quick, with a braid the color of dark honey, and Sena, 2 years older, with their mother's eyes and a habit of clenching her hands into fists when she was afraid. Kyre loved them both not as an adult person recalls feelings, but as a child loves, who does not yet know how to name it but knows for certain. The settlement was called Grai. 47 families, 2 wells, 1 forge, a field to the horizon. All of this belonged to Count Waldor, not in a figurative sense, but in the most direct one. The field, houses, wells, forge, and people. Everything was the Count's property. People as a separate line in the property register between livestock and inventory. Kyre understood this at 3 years old. This was his first conscious discovery in this world. He understood it not from explanations from observation. The Count's steward, a fat man named Drog, came to Grai once a month. On horseback, in good clothes with 2 guards. He always spoke with the fathers of families standing, while they stood slightly bent. He named the numbers how much grain had been gathered, how much there should be. If the numbers did not match, the guards found the one who was guilty, or the one who had been nearby, which was almost the same thing. Kyre watched this from the threshold of the house, holding onto a wooden post, and thought. An adult mind in a child's body, this was strange and useful at the same time. Strange because the child's emotions were real, and the fear was real, and the anger was real, unprocessed, sharp. Useful because he could look at what was happening and see not simply a bad person hurts good people, but a structure, a system, a mechanism that keeps some below and others above. The mechanism worked on several things at once. The first, physical strength. Nobles had weapons and training, slaves had neither one nor the other. The second law, everything that happened to slaves was legal according to the laws of the kingdom. The third, disunity. Every settlement lived by itself, not knowing about neighbors, having no connections, having nothing in common. And the fourth, the most important, absence of hope. People stopped thinking that it could be different. This was the most reliable lock of all. Kyre looked at Drog, who rode away on horseback without looking back, and thought, locks are open from the inside. His mother died in spring when Kyre was 6. Not from illness from work. Simply one day she did not get up. Cern found her in the morning, already cold. He did not cry in front of the children, went to the field and worked all day silently, and in the evening, when he thought everyone was asleep, Kyre heard him through the thin wall. After that, something in Cern broke not sharply but slowly, like a tree that is gnawed from within. He continued to work, continued to feed the children, continued to exist. But that quiet dignity that had been in him before went somewhere. He became smaller. Kyre looked at this and remembered. This is what this system does to people. It does not only take away strength, it takes away the self. Lyra took the house upon herself. At 10 years old, she cooked, washed, watched over Kyre and Sena with that seriousness that children have when circumstances have made them adults before their time. Sena helped her. Kyre too, he was small but persistent, and Lyra eventually stopped driving him away from work. That summer, he began to learn to read. Not from a teacher, there were no teachers in Grai. He found a scrap of paper with letters by the road, part of some announcement or order thrown away by a passerby. He asked the blacksmith Hort, an old man who could read a rarity among slaves. Hort looked at him for a long time, then asked, "Why do you need it?" Kyre answered honestly, "To know what they do not want us to know." Hort was silent even longer. Then he began to teach. Sena was taken first. Steward Drog came in autumn with a paper count. Waldor was transferring several families to his younger brother, who had received new lands in the north. In the list of transferred property was Sena separately, not with the family. Drog explained without looking at Cern that the girl was being taken into service in the house as a servant. It was a good place, they fed and clothed there. Cern stood and was silent with the expression of a person who knows that any word will only make the situation worse. Kair was 8 years old. He stood next to his father and watched as Drog's guard took Sena by the hand and led her to the cart. Sena did not scream, she looked back at Kair with the expression he remembered for the rest of his life. Not fear, a question. Why is no one doing anything? The cart left. Lyra went into the house and did not come out until morning. Cern sat at the threshold and looked into the ground. Kair stood on the road and looked after the cart until it disappeared behind the hill. Something in him changed at that moment. It did not break like in his father, it hardened. Like metal that cools in the right shape. Lyra was taken 2 years later. This time another steward, another paper, another count. Lyra was 14, the age when girls from slave families began to be taken into richer houses. Also as a servant. Also to a good place. Kair already knew what it meant. He knew this because he read by the age of 10 he could read well enough to sometimes get to documents that Drog left without attention. He knew how the service system worked in noble houses, knew what happened to young female slaves in those houses, knew that they had no right to say no in anything. When the cart with Lyra left, Kair went to the well, sat on the edge and looked into the water for a long time. Then he said quietly, only for himself, the first real oath in his life, not a childish one, but the one that hardens together with the metal inside and remains forever. I will find them. Both of them. And those who did this, I will find too. The 13th year, 3 years passed. Kair was 13. He grew still not tall, but wiry, with that hidden physical strength that appears in children who work from early childhood. He worked in the field next to Cern, who by this time had become almost a shadow of his former self, silent, obedient, tired to the bone. They almost did not talk. Kair did not know what to say to a father who had stopped fighting. Cern did not know what to say to a son in whose eyes he saw something frightening, not malice, but cold, patient purposefulness that he did not know how to name. Besides work in the field, Kair did 3 things. The first continued to study. By this time, Hort had taught him to write, count, and gave him the only book he had, an old treatise on the trade routes of the kingdom. Kair reread it 7 times, knew it by heart. From it he extracted a map of the kingdom, not precise, but sufficient to understand where everything was located. The second observed. The guards, the stewards' routes, how the life of a noble estate was arranged from a distance. Count Waldor's estate was 3 hours' walk from Grai. Kair once sneaked there at night simply to look. He looked, remembered. The third listened to people. In Grai, at the market in the nearest town where they were sometimes taken. By the well in the evening by the fire. People talked. Not about rebellion, they never talked about that. It was a deadly, dangerous topic. But they talked about where life was slightly better, where the steward was softer, where the count was not too greedy. From these conversations, Kair collected a map not of roads, but of people. Who was dissatisfied with what? Who was capable of what? Who had lost something and had not forgotten it? In the middle of autumn of the 13th year of his life, guests came to Grai. There were 7 of them. A young nobleman named Rice Talorn, nephew of Count Waldor, a little over 20 years old, with the kind of face on which idleness and cruelty had managed to leave their first traces earlier than intelligence. 4 knights from his retinue, not combat ones, but those who serve at courts for appearance, well-dressed and poorly thinking. And 2 servants, who looked at the ground and tried to be invisible. They arrived after sunset, noisy, drunk, with torches. Rice Talorn explained that he was returning from a hunt, tired, wanted lodging and entertainment. The settlement belonged to his uncle means everything in it belonged to him too. Nobleman's logic. Kair watched from the darkness behind the house where they stopped. Not hiding, simply standing in the shadow because no one looked at slaves in the dark. The analytical mind worked quickly and coldly. 7, 4 truly armed, 2 servants not a threat. The nobleman himself holds a sword as a tool, not as a weapon. Drunk, this lowers reaction but increases unpredictability. The first hour they drank. They demanded food which was not available in sufficient quantity, laughed at this, threw bones to the dogs. In the second hour, the entertainment began. Kair would not describe this in detail either then or later. He remembered the facts. 2 men were beaten only because they were nearby. Old Hort the blacksmith, who taught Kair to read, one of the knights struck with the hilt of a sword for not bowing quickly enough. Hort fell and did not get up. Then the knights began entering houses. Cern stood at the threshold of his house with the expression of a person who is already broken and knows it. and the only thing he has enough strength for is to stand and not fall. One of the knights said something to him and laughed. Cern did not answer. The knight lost interest and went to the next house. Screams began a few minutes later. Kyer stood in the darkness and felt how something inside him, that very place where 3 years ago metal had hardened, first became red hot, then calmed down. Not with the coldness of indifference, with the coldness of rage, which understood that now was not the time. Now was not the time, because he was alone, 13 years old without a weapon, and if he came out now he would die, and nothing would change. He would save no one, only add one more body to those that had already fallen. Now was not the time. It was the hardest decision of his life. He turned around and went into the field, not running away, leaving deliberately, preserving something important that might be needed later. Behind him, having heard his quiet signal 3 knocks on the post, 2 neighboring boys came out, whom in recent months he had unconsciously kept nearby, feeling that they were needed. They lay in the field behind the hill and heard the sounds from the village. The boys trembled. Kyer did not tremble. He looked at the night sky and pronounced the second oath, real, the one that formulates everything at once. Quietly, almost soundlessly, but every word clearly. Every nobleman, count, baron, king, knight, everyone who keeps other people like cattle and kills them for entertainment will die. Not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, but will die. By my hands or by the hands of those I train. I do not know how long it will take. I do not care. I will begin and will not stop. The sky above him was dark and indifferent. Kyer looked at it and thought, good. An indifferent sky does not interfere with work. By dawn, the guests had left. Kyer returned to the settlement at dawn. Hort was dead. 2 men were alive but crippled. Several houses were destroyed. People sat by their houses or stood, looking into the ground, with the expression that Kyer had already learned to read and hated, most of all the expression of people who accepted what had happened as the norm. Cern stood by his house. When Kyer came up, he looked at him for a long time. You left, Cern said. Not condemning, simply stating, yes, you did right. I know. Cern looked at him for another second. Then quietly, so only Kyer could hear, where will you go? Kyer looked at his father. Cern knew. Somehow, despite all his brokenness, he knew. I do not know yet. But not back. Take the knife. Cern nodded toward the house. Behind the rafter. I hid it for 20 years, did not know why, now I know. Kyer went into the house, found the knife short but of good steel, with a wooden handle. He took it, went out. Cern stood where he had stood. You are not coming? Kyer asked. A long pause. I am too tired to go. Pause, but you go. Go quickly and far, and do not look back. Looking back is harmful. That was the last thing Cern said to him. Kyer did not look back. Not because he did not want to, because his father had asked. Kyer walked east. Not because east was better than west, simply because in the east, according to Hort's trade treatise, there was the border between Count Waldor's lands and Baron Seth's lands. A border is always a gap, a place where the power of 2 masters collides and both look slightly in different directions. In gaps there is space for maneuver. He walked for 3 days. On the 2nd day he found food did not steal, found a fallen apple, several mushrooms, a stream with fish, which he caught with bare hands, spending 2 hours on it. 13 years in the field gave certain survival skills. On the 3rd day he found them. 3. Women know, girls, roughly his age or slightly older. They were hiding in a ravine under the roots of an old tree, wrapped in one cloak for the 3 of them. One was wounded, a cut on the shoulder, already inflamed. All 3 looked at Kyer with the expression of animals driven into a corner. Readiness for the worst because the best had long ceased to seem probable. I am not an enemy, Kyer said. He already understood then that words are important, and that the right words are the first weapon. I am a runaway myself. 3 days now. They were silent. I have a knife and knowledge of where to go. You do not. We can help each other or part ways. I do not care. But if you part ways, the girl with the shoulder will die in 3 days from infection. Silence. Then the one who was older and looked sharper than the others asked, where to go? Her name was Ira. She was 15, 2 years older than Kyer, tall, dark-haired, with that special precision in her gaze that appears in people accustomed to quickly assessing a situation. She was from Baron Seth's estate, had run away a week ago after she killed, did not try to kill, but killed a guard who came to her at night. The knife she took was his own. The wounded one was named Nay Small, reddish-haired, quiet, with the movements of a person who had long been taught to be unnoticed. She treated wounds better than all of them learned by accident, caring for the sick in the house where she served. The third Vera, almost the same age as Kair, swarthy with short broken nails and a habit of clenching her fists that reminded him of Sena. She was almost always silent, but looked in such a way that it was clear. Behind this silence, there was constant work of thought. Kair treated Nay's shoulder, washed the wound with river water, made a bandage from a piece of his own shirt. Then they sat under the roots of the tree and he told them exactly as much as was needed for making a decision. Where he was going, why, what he intended to do. Not an oath, a plan. The first, rough one, mostly consisting of gaps that had to be filled. But a structure. Era listened without interrupting, then asked, "Do you seriously think 3 children can do something against the whole kingdom?" "No," Kair answered. 3, no. "But not 3. How many?" "As many as needed. I do not know this number yet." "How will you find them?" "They are everywhere. Every estate, every village, every house where female slaves serve. They do not need to be found, one needs to be where they already want to leave and give direction." Era looked at him for a long time. "You are 13 years old," she said. "Yes, you speak like a person who is 40. Is that a compliment or an observation?" "An observation." Pause. "I am going with you." Nay and Vera looked at each other, then both nodded. They moved through the borderlands where the jurisdiction of one nobleman ended and another's began, in gray zones where no one watched especially closely. Kair learned on the move. He learned from every person he met carefully, unobtrusively, asking questions in such a way as to seem a curious child, not dangerous. An old hunter by the eastern forest taught him to set snares and read tracks. A runaway merchant whom they met by the river and helped repair his cart told them about trade routes and about how nobles communicate with each other, through what channels, through what people. An elderly healer woman who lived in the forest deliberately alone and deliberately farther from all estates taught Nay the basics of treating wounds and poisons, yes, poisons too. People joined them. Not immediately, not in a crowd 1 by 1, 2 by 2, cautiously. Runaway slaves, mostly female slaves. Men ran less often because men were hunted more actively and punished more demonstratively. Kair did not search for them, specially simply found himself nearby at the right moment with the right words. He understood early that the best words are not about revenge and not about revolution. The best words are about a specific next task. Where to go at night, where to cross the river, how to get food. Revenge was his goal. For them, the first goal was survival. By the end of the first year, there were 9 of them. Kair was the youngest. They needed a name. Not the name of a group of runaways that would make them simply runaways. The name of an organization. Because Kair already understood, they were building not a gang, not a squad of Avengers, they were building a tool. A tool must have a name that people will remember and want to join. He thought about this for 3 days while they camped by a small lake in the forest. On the 3rd night, he looked at the moon incomplete, dim, hidden by clouds, giving little light. But it was there. Smoldering, almost invisible and still there. The smoldering moon, that is what they were. Not a bright torch that everyone sees and immediately puts out. Not darkness that does nothing. Something in between dark enough to be invisible, light enough to see themselves. He told this to Era. She was silent for a while, then said, "It fits." Vera nodded. Nay said she liked it because the moon always returns even after the darkest night. They became the smoldering moon. By the age of 15, Kair understood that a spontaneous group of runaways had to become something else. There were already 14 of them. Almost all women, it happened not intentionally, simply more women ran away. And women were less often searched for with dogs, and women more willingly followed a person who did not look at them as a thing. Ages from 13 to 22. Different experience, different skills, different stories, but one common point. All of them had lost something they should not have lost. Kair sat by the fire late in the evening and thought about structure. Structure is the first thing that distinguishes an organization from a crowd. A crowd makes noise and falls apart at the first serious pressure. An organization holds because everyone knows their place and their task. He divided them by abilities not by his own choice, but by their own. He asked each one, "What can you do best? What do you want to be able to do?" The answers were different. Era was a born fighter. She understood movement, space, the moment. Kair appointed her responsible for combat training, although she knew no more than the others. She accepted it as a task and began to think about how to teach in the absence of a teacher by becoming a teacher herself. Nay became responsible for medicine and poisons. In a year with the healer woman, she learned more than most people learn in a lifetime, and continued to learn from every source she encountered. Vera turned out to be a master of invisibility. She knew how to walk so that she was not noticed, knew how to be in a room and leave no trace of her presence. Care began to teach her reconnaissance, not what he knew himself, but what he considered logical. Observation, memory, transmission of information without writing. The others received tasks according to their abilities, and Care himself took the most important task for himself: to understand the enemy's system deeply enough to find cracks in it. Not physical cracks in walls, cracks in the structure of power, where money flows the wrong way, where one count envies another, where a knight is dissatisfied with his lord, where the law says one thing and practice another. These cracks, this is where the real work begins. It was small and important at the same time. In the town of Brena at the market, Vera noticed a trader who sold papers documents. Among them were forged travel permits, giving the right to free movement through 2 counties. They were expensive. The trader was cautious and sold only to trusted people. Kair spent 2 weeks to understand who these trusted people were, where the trader lived, what his route was, and whether he had weaknesses. The weakness was a debt to another trader, a larger one. The debt was unpleasant and urgent. Kair came to the trader not as a client, as a solution to a problem. He had no money. He had something else. Information that the Count's tax inspector was going to check the market within the next 10 days. And for the trader with his illegal goods, this would be very inconvenient. Where did a 13-year-old boy know already a 15-year-old get such information? It does not matter. What matters is that the information is accurate. The deal was simple: 6 travel permits in exchange for a warning. The trader thought for 2 hours and agreed. The information about the inspection, by the way, was also true. Kair learned it from a market scribe, whom he had helped with one awkward situation 2 weeks earlier. Everything had been built in advance. 6 travel permits. 6 people from the Smoldering Moon received the opportunity to move freely between counties. Aira said in the evening, when Kair explained how it had happened, "You used one person to get what was needed from another." Yes, and the first person did not even know he was used. No, he thought he had made a profitable deal. This. She searched for the word. "This is cold." "This is effective," Kair answered. Cold and effective are often the same thing. When you do not have the strength to take directly, you take with your mind. It is neither worse nor better. It is another weapon. Ira looked at him. "You are 15 years old," she said again. "You already said that. I will keep saying it until it stops surprising me." The real work began in his 16th year. The Smoldering Moon numbered 23 people, the core, which Kair knew personally and trusted. Around the core, a network was forming people who were not part of the group, but owed them something. Information, shelter, almost caught and saved, or simply believed a quiet 15-year-old youth with adult eyes. Kair developed what he privately called the Doctrine of Invisibility. The Smoldering Moon did not wage war against nobles, did not attack corteges, did not burn estates, did not kill guards. That would have been a war they would lose in the very first month. Instead, infiltration. Individual people from the group entered the enemy's structures as servants, workers, messengers. Not all at once, one by one, carefully, with a cover story and preparation. Vera entered first. She got a job as a washerwoman in the house of a minor baron in the east, not hiding openly with a false story about a family from a neighboring village. She spent 3 months there. In 3 months, she learned the baron's travel routes, the names of his creditors, the contents of 2 letters he wrote to a neighboring count, and the fact that his steward was stealing grain not for himself, but for resale to an illegal trader in Brine. The information about the stealing steward turned out to be the first real tool. Kair used it not for blackmail leaves traces and creates enemies. He used it to create an ally. Through a chain of intermediaries, the steward received a quiet warning. His scheme was known, but it would go nowhere on the condition that sometimes, when needed, certain people could spend the night in the baron's warehouse without unnecessary questions. The steward thought and agreed. He had no choice, but he thought there was a choice that is important. The Smoldering Moon received its first foothold inside the noble structure. By the age of 17, he was a different person. Not outwardly still short, wiry, with a face on which fatigue and youth existed simultaneously, like 2 incompatible layers. But inwardly different. That boy who lay in the field behind the hill and listened to the sounds from the village was real. This youth sitting over a map by candlelight and moving markers was also real. Between them, 4 years that cost 40. He thought about his sisters every day, not painfully productively. He gathered information. Sena had been transferred to the family of Count Waldor's brother, who settled in the north. That had been 4 years ago. Lyra to another count, farther east. He knew the directions, for now only the directions. Aira sat beside him and sharpened a knife. She did this when she was thinking. Mechanically, rhythmically. "You never talk about why you are doing all this," she said. "I do," Kair answered. "You talk about the system and power, not about your sisters." The sisters are personal. The personal is included in the work. No, the personal is why I started. The work is what is greater than the personal. I stopped doing this only for my sisters long ago. Era looked at him. Do you believe it is possible to change all this? Truly? Not kill one count but everything? Kyer put the map aside and looked at her. I do not know, he answered honestly. But I know something else for certain. Every person we pulled out is one person who is no longer kept like cattle. Every document we obtained is one door that opened. Every ally inside their structure is one crack. Pause. Palaces do not fall from one blow. They fall from 1,000 cracks. Slowly. Yes, slowly. But they fall. Era nodded, not convinced, but with the expression of a person who had decided to walk this road regardless of the answer. Then we continue, she said. We continue, Kyer agreed. Beyond the walls of the shelter was night. The smoldering, almost invisible moon gave little light, but it was there. That was enough. I continue fantasy names, continuous text, approximately 4,000 words, maximum retention. Winter in these lands was cold and useful at the same time. Useful because nobles traveled less in winter, checked estates less often, and the roads between counties emptied so much that one could move almost openly if one did not do stupid things. Kyer did not do stupid things, he made it a principle. The camp stood by the Sail River, 3 hours on foot from the nearest village, and 4 from the nearest estate. He chose the place personally, closed on 3 sides by forest, with water nearby with 2 escape routes in different directions. This was a rule: every campsite must have 2 escape routes, without exceptions. There were 27 of them. Over the last half year, 4 more had come, and again mostly women, again runaways, again with those stories that Kyer had heard enough times to know by heart, but never listened to half-heartedly. He listened fully every time, not out of politeness, out of necessity. In every story there was something specific. The name of a steward, the route of the guards, the layout of rooms in an estate, the character of the master. All this went into memory. Kyer's memory was exceptional. Not magical, simply he had been accustomed since childhood to remembering what others considered insignificant. It was the first and cheapest form of power he mastered. On winter evenings he taught. It became a ritual after dinner by the fire while the darkness outside made the world small and closed. He did not lecture, did not speak from a podium. He asked questions and listened to answers, then suggested thinking differently. Sometimes he took a stick and drew schemes in the snow estate, roads, guard points, and asked, if you need to enter unnoticed, where will you go? If you need to leave quickly, what will you do first? Era turned physical training into something more than Kyer had expected. She understood early that she had neither the time nor the resources to train 27 people to fight like knights, and it was not necessary. Knights are beaten in open battle. Open battle was contraindicated for the smoldering moon. Era invented something else. She taught not how to win a fight, but how not to get into one. Movement, speed, knowledge of one's own body, how to fall without injury, how to run for a long time without stopping, how to stand so that you are not noticed. And as a separate course for those who wanted one strike. One precise strike in the right place, which ends everything. Not a fight, but a completion. Nay worked with what she had, and by the age of 17, she had more knowledge than many certified healers in cities. She knew which plants kill slowly, quickly, unnoticed, knew how to treat a wound in field conditions without tools, knew the supplies that must always be kept, and could obtain them from the forest at any time of year. She did not speak of poisons as weapons, called it the chemistry of possibilities. Kyer valued her precision in words. Vera was no longer in the camp at that time. The capital of the kingdom was called Valen. A big city by the standards of this world, very big, with a population of about 100,000 people, with a palace on a hill, with trading quarters, with several markets, with that mixture of wealth and poverty that exists in any large city when there is nothing between the upper and lower floors of society except distance. Vera entered Valen 3 months ago with a forged writ, a cover story about a merchant's widow from the south, and Kyer's instructions not obtained from books, but composed from hundreds of conversations, observations, and that special logic he had developed over 4 years. Look first, speak later, and never hurry to where you are being called too willingly. She got a job in a laundry in the trading quarter. Laundresses hear everything. They are in houses, they are in courtyards, they are in corridors where people speak without thinking, because laundresses are furniture. Vera was good furniture. In 3 months, she sent Kyer 5 messages through the chain of intermediaries they had spent half a year building. Each message was encoded in trade language. The price of wool has risen meant troop movement. the grain harvest is good, meant financial operations of the nobility, and so on. The code was primitive and Care would complicate it later, but for now it worked. From the 5 messages, Care extracted the following. King Torvin III had been ill for the 2nd year already. Seriously ill, not fatally yet, but enough for real power to pass to the Council of Lords. The council consisted of 7 counts and 2 dukes. A quiet war for influence was going on between them, not with swords, with money, marriages, and betrayals. 3 of the 7 counts were in debt. One of the 2 dukes, Duke Sorn, was intelligent, cautious, and had the reputation of a man who knew how to wait. This was a map, not geographical political, and the political map was more important to Care than any other. Era found him late in the evening. He was sitting alone by the dying fire with paper on his knee, transferring Vera's data into a system of symbols he had developed himself and kept a duplicate copy in his head. She sat beside him without warning, was silent for several minutes, then said, "A man came to me." Kyer raised his head. "What man?" "From the past. I thought he was dead." Pause. "His name is Darn. We were together in Baron Seth's estate. He managed to run away a year ago. He followed rumors about us. Found the camp. I know. Tara told me that an unfamiliar man had come. I wanted to talk to you earlier. Why did you not talk? Wanted you to come yourself." Era was silent for a while. He wants to join. "I see 3 options," Care said evenly. "First, he is what he seems, a runaway with a story that matches yours and wants to be part of something. Second, he is watching us on someone else's assignment, and his appearance is either an infiltration attempt or bait. Third, he is sincere, but he has already been found and is being used as an unwilling beacon." Era did not answer immediately. "You think of him as a threat. I think of him as an unknown variable. That is not the same thing." Kyer put the paper aside. "What do you think of him?" "I think I knew him for 3 years, that he is a good person. Good people can be used just like bad ones. Sometimes more easily because they do not suspect." Kyer, there was something in her voice that he rarely heard, not anger, but something more complicated. "I understand your logic. I accept your logic. But we cannot build an organization in which every new person is first of all a threat." "No," he agreed. "But every new person is first of all a question. He becomes a threat only if the answer to the question is bad. And how will you get the answer to the question about Darn?" "I will give him false information. One small detail, a wrong date or a wrong direction. Nothing that will put anyone at risk. Just something false. And I will wait to see whether this detail appears somewhere outside." Era looked at the fire. "Do you always do this with new people? With those who do not have a reliable story? Yes. Did you do this with me?" Pause. "No. With you I saw the cut on your shoulder from the sword of the guard you killed with his own knife." "That was a story." Era smiled slightly, not cheerfully, but honestly. "Will Darn stay?" she asked. "For a month. After that, the decision based on data." Kyer took the paper again. "And Era. If he turns out to be what he seems, I will be the first to say it." "I know," she answered. "In that you are honest. The false detail did not appear anywhere. In a month, Darn turned out to be what he seemed. A man of 20, a former groom from Baron Seth's estate. Strong, silent, with practical skills, horses, blacksmithing, repairs. He did not ask unnecessary questions about the group's structure and did not push toward the center. He simply worked, and worked well." Kyer announced the decision in the evening briefly without explanations about the test. He only said, "Darn stays." Era looked at him. Kyer nodded once, barely noticeably. She understood. Darn became the 28th. The operation was born from the information Vera brought. One of the 3 counts in Debt Count Lane Marok was supposed to send a grain transport to the capital in 2 months. Not simply grain, a tax payment toward the debt to the royal treasury. If the payment did not arrive, the debt would pass to Duke Sorn, who had long wanted Marok's lands. Count Marok knew this, and therefore the transport's guard was serious. But that was not what mattered. What mattered was something else. People were being transported in the same convoy. 12 people from Marok's estate, whom he was selling as cattle are sold, with documents and a price to a nobleman in the capital who bought workers for his mines in the north. Work in the mines meant death within 5 to 7 years. Count Marok knew this. The buyer knew this. The documents did not specify this. Kyer learned about it 3 weeks before the transport's departure. He sat alone with this information for 2 days. Thinking. Weighing. To attack the transport openly meant declaring himself. The smoldering moon existed because almost no one knew about it. That was the main advantage. An open attack would destroy this advantage. Not attacking meant allowing 12 people to die in the mines. On the 3rd day, he found a 3rd way. Era listened to the plan silently from beginning to end without interrupting. When he finished, she asked only, "Will it work?" If everyone does their part precisely, yes. If someone makes a mistake in the details, no. Then we will not make mistakes. The operation was called Simply Inside Transport. The transport's route went through Tane Forest, 3 hours of road through a dense coniferous mass, where the road narrowed to one lane and the guards inevitably stretched into a column. A week before departure, Darn personally rode along the road, memorized every turn. Nay prepared mixtures non-lethal, calming, based on smoking root, which when set on fire gave 20 minutes of heavy fog in the head. Vera, who returned from the capital specially for this, obtained road guard uniforms, did not steal them. Bought them from a reseller who traded worn clothing. 4 from the smoldering moon stood by the road an hour before the transport. In guard uniforms with documents about quarantine inspection, the paper looked official. Kair spent 3 days making it convincing. The transport stopped. The senior guard came out to talk. While he talked, Nay with 2 assistants set fire to 3 small fires on the leeward side, 100 meters into the forest. The smoke went in the right direction. After 7 minutes, the guards began to behave strangely. It was not an instant shutdown. This was exactly what Kair had calculated correctly. An instant effect would have been suspicious. Slow worsening looked like fatigue, like heat, like illness. The guards sat down, shook their heads. Several people leaned against the carts. Kair came out last. He approached the senior guard who sat on the ground with the look of a person suddenly overcome by drowsiness and said quietly and clearly, "The people in the wagon get out on their own. You will later say that there was an ambush in the forest and you managed to scare them off. That is better than explaining to Count Merrick why all of you fell asleep on the road." The senior guard looked at him with cloudy eyes, then slowly nodded. Kair opened the wagon. 12 people, men, women, 1 boy about 12 years old looked at him from the darkness, bound, with the expression of people who had long stopped waiting for anything good. Quickly, Kair said, "We have 20 minutes. They got out, all 12. Era led them into the forest. She knew the route by heart. Kair left the road last, turned around. The guards sat and lay around the stopped transport, doing nothing. The transport arrived in the capital without its cargo. The senior guard reported an ambush by unknown people in Tane Forest. Count Marok caused a scandal. The investigation gave nothing. Unknown people, no tracks, no witnesses. The smoldering moon gained 12 people. The boy's name was Thais, 12 years old. Small, dark, with those quick, attentive eyes that Kair knew how to recognize the eyes of a person who had long been accustomed to thinking quickly because it helped survive. Thais was silent for the first 2 days. On the third, he approached Kair himself while he was sitting with a map and asked without preamble, "Are you in command?" "Yes, are you the oldest?" "No, I just think faster than the others." Thais looked at the map. "I know how to read maps." Kair raised his head. "From where?" "Was a messenger for Count Marok's steward, delivered letters, saw many maps. Do you remember them?" "Some." Kair moved over. "Sit, show what you remember." Thais sat and began to speak. Kair listened and after a few minutes understood. The boy remembered surprisingly accurately. Not photographically, but with that special memory of a person who saw maps as tasks, not as pictures. By evening, Thais became part of the inner circle. Not because Kair was soft-hearted, because such people are not encountered often, and when they are, their place is where they are needed most. Vera brought information at the beginning of summer. It was not what she was looking for. She was looking for something else, following the financial flows of one of the capital merchants. But along the way, she stumbled upon a name in a document she should not have seen but saw because the document lay open on the desk while the owner of the office stepped out, and Vera knew how to read quickly. The name was Lyra from Grai. Kair was sitting when Vera told him about it. Vera spoke evenly, without preparation. She knew he preferred direct transmission of information, without wrappings. Lyra from Grai was mentioned in the document as part of the property of a certain Deln Crow, a middle-ranking nobleman engaged in trade of luxury items, living in the city of Etten, north of Valen. Not a count, not a baron, simply a wealthy man with noble rights and without special connections at court. In the document, Lyra was listed as high-rank domestic servant, a wording that Kair understood immediately. His face did not change. He did not stand up sharply. He sat and looked at Vera evenly. "Date of the document?" he asked. "A month and a half ago. Fresh, so alive, so alive. Etten, how far is that from us?" 8 days of travel. I checked on Theis's map. Guards at Deln Crows? I do not know exactly. He is a merchant with noble status, not military. Probably a small guard, more for appearance than for protection. Kyra was silent for a long time. Era was nearby. She was always nearby when Vera reported. That was the rule. She said nothing, just was there. This is not an operation of the smoldering moon, Kyra finally said. Both women were silent. This is my personal matter. I have no right to use the group's resources for personal matters. Kyra, Era said quietly. No. He did not raise his voice. I said this to everyone when we started. Personal remains personal, work remains work. If I break this rule for myself, I will break it for everyone. Pause. I will go alone. You will not go alone, Era said. Era, no. Listen to me. She spoke evenly, without unnecessary emotion. This was how she knew how to say truly important things. Your sister is in a nobleman's house. You are going alone into an unfamiliar city with unfamiliar guards for a person you have not seen in 4 years and about whom you know nothing except a name and a document. This is not a personal matter. This is a high-risk operation carried out without preparation. What would you yourself say to any of us if we proposed such a plan? A long pause. That it is a bad plan. Exactly, she looked at him. We prepare this properly, like any other operation. Vera rides ahead and watches. Tice makes a map of Eton from what he remembers. We make a plan. And then we go. You, me, and 2 more. Kyra looked at her. Why is this important to you? Because the group needs you alive and in order. Pause. And because you are the only person with whom I go anywhere without unnecessary questions. You could sometimes do the same. Kyra was silent for another second. 3 weeks for preparation, he said. 2, Era answered. 2.5. Good. The city was small trading, neat, with that provincial self-satisfaction that cities have when they are wealthy enough not to be in need, but not important enough to matter in great politics. The noble quarter was in the northern part. Deln Crow's house, third from the corner, 3 stories with a gate and a small garden. Vera spent 5 days there before their arrival. Her report was precise. Guards 4, changing in pairs, patrols on a predictable schedule. Deln Crow, himself a man over 50, cautious, not inclined to violence, one of those merchants who avoid direct conflicts because conflicts interfere with business. Servants 8 people, including Lyra. Vera saw Lyra once at the market with a basket. Described, tall, dark hair, holds herself straight. Face, Vera was silent before this word adult. Too adult for 21 years. Kyra accepted this as information. He built the operation not on breaking in and not on force. Deln Crow was a merchant means he spoke the language of money and profit. Kayer spent a day and a half creating a persona. A not wealthy merchant from the southern provinces, looking for reliable domestic servants for his wife, heard recommendations about Crow's people. Appropriate clothing, not poor and not rich, properly worn. Speech not slave, not noble, mercantile. Kayer rehearsed this with Era 15 times. Era waited outside with Darn. Nay stood at the eastern gates of the city with the horses. Vera was nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Kyre entered Deln Crow's house through the front entrance as a person with a business proposal should enter. Deln Crow received him in a small study, dry, attentive man with the habit of assessing an interlocutor quickly and not hiding it. He listened to Kyre's offer to buy servants for his wife. Good price, immediately without particular interest. He had many such offers. I currently have no people for sale, he said. Everyone is occupied. I heard about one woman, Kyre said evenly. Lyra, she was recommended to me specifically. I can offer a good price. Deln Crow changed slightly, barely noticeably, but Kyre knew how to see such changes. Lyra is not for sale. Pause. Who recommended her? A merchant from Valen. Lo Karen. He knows you. Lo Karen existed. Vera checked. He was a real merchant who had business ties with Crow 2 years ago. Long enough ago for Crow not to remember the details, but real enough not to raise suspicion. Crow was silent for a while, then said again, Lyra is not for sale, but I have other people with good skills. Kyre understood that the direct path was closed, switched. I understand. Then perhaps allow me to look at the others. Crow nodded to a servant. The servant left. Kyre sat and waited. 3 minutes. Then the door opened and 2 entered, an elderly man and a woman. Not Lyra. But behind their backs in the corridor for a second appeared a figure, tall, dark hair, a basket in her hands. Stopped in the doorway of a neighboring room. Looked. Kyre's face did not change. Lyra's did not change either, but she recognized him. He saw it in the way her hands froze on the basket for 1 second, then moved again. That second was enough. She went deeper into the corridor. Kyre spent another 20 minutes with Crow. pretended to consider the offered people, politely refused, arranged to return in a week with a more specific request, and left. On the street, Era walked beside him, not right next to him, at a distance of 2 people. Saw her, Kair said quietly. Alive? Alive. Pause. Changed. 4 years? Yes. How do we get her out? Not by purchase. Crow will not sell. Kair thought while walking, but he has a weakness. Traders always have a weakness in money or reputation. Vera will find it. Era nodded. They walked through the streets of Atan, ordinary passers-by, unremarkable, and Kair thought about the second in the corridor, about the hands frozen on the basket. Lyra was alive. She recognized him. And she did not give him up to Crow, although she could. Although it possibly would have given her some advantage, she did not give him up. So she had waited. Maybe had always waited. Kair did not keep diaries. That was a vulnerability. Records can be found. But sometimes at night when everyone slept, he formulated things aloud quietly, almost soundlessly for himself. It helped him think precisely. That night he said, Lyra is alive. Sena direction exists, point does not. The smoldering moon. 28 people, the first operation without losses, the first foothold in the capital. Duke Sorn knows how to wait. Count Merrick is in debt. The king is ill. Pause. I am 17 years old. That is little, but it is more than nothing. And every day more. The night outside was quiet. The moon smoldering, incomplete, almost invisible in the clouds. Kair looked at it through the small window of the rented room and thought that he had no right to hurry. Haste killed people. He had seen this enough times. Slow, precise, patient movement, that is what holds the structure. One step, then the second, then the third. Lyra will be next week, then Sena, then further. The smoldering moon burned slowly, without smoke, without unnecessary light. Exactly the way it should burn. I continue fantasy names, continuous text, approximately 4,000 words, maximum retention. Vera found the weakness in 3 days. Deln Crow was a careful man in business, in words, in reputation. That was exactly why one thing was especially painful for him. 7 years ago, he bought a batch of goods from a merchant from the eastern provinces, knowing that the goods were stolen. This was a common practice in trade circles, but officially it was considered a crime, and if the right person informed the right nobleman, Crow's reputation would end together with his freedom. The merchant who had sold him that goods had been dead for 5 years already. No witnesses remained except one, an old scribe who kept the books for that merchant, and who now lived a quiet life in a town 2 days from Atan. Vera did not speak with the scribe. She simply learned of his existence and passed Kair the name and address. Kair wrote a letter. Not a threat, a business proposal. Short, clean, without unnecessary words. The essence. Certain information about a deal from 7 years ago is known to certain people. These people are not interested in publicity and are not going to the authorities. They are interested in one thing. A woman named Lyra passes to them voluntarily with full release from all obligations to Crow, with a corresponding document. In exchange, silence forever and confirmation that the scribe is unavailable for testimony. Crow received the letter the next morning. The answer came by evening. 1 sheet, 1 word, agreed. Kair reread it twice, then said to Era, tomorrow morning. Lyra came out of the gates of Crow's house at 9 in the morning, alone. With a small bundle, everything of hers fit into one bundle. Kair understood this immediately and remembered it as a separate fact. She walked down the street evenly, not hurrying, with the look of a person used to not showing what she thinks. Kair stood at the corner 30 meters away. She saw him before he moved. Stopped. They looked at each other for several seconds, which were longer than several seconds. Then Lyra came up and stood in front of him. She was taller than he remembered, or he remembered her differently. The face was the same and not the same at the same time. The same features, but a different expression. What Vera had called too adult for 21 years. Kair, she said. Just the name, without an exclamation, without tears. Lyra. Pause. You grew up, she said. You too. I saw you in the house. 3 days ago. I know, you did not give yourself away. You too. Lyra looked at him for another second, then nodded with one movement, shortly, like a person who had made some inner decision. Where are we going? First out of the city. Then I will tell everything. They walked side by side down the street, ordinary people, morning passers-by. Era followed 20 meters behind. Darn was at the eastern gates. Nay with the horses outside the city. When they passed through the gates and the city was left behind, Lyra said without turning her head, You came for me intentionally. This is not an accident. No, you knew where I was. I learned 3 weeks ago. How? I have people in the right places. Lyra was silent for a while. You are not simply a runaway, she said. No, what are you? That takes a long time to explain. We have time while we walk. He told her over 3 hours of the journey as much as he told new people, only after a month of checking. Because it was Lyra, and because he had no logical justification to delay information. Only instinct said careful, and reason said this is your sister. He decided to listen to reason. Lyra listened without interrupting. Sometimes asked short, precise questions, not emotional, analytical. How many people? Where does the funding come from? How do you transmit information? This surprised him, not the content of the questions, but their nature. 4 years in the merchant's house had not only broken something, they had also created something. You know how to read documents, he said. Not a question. Crow took me to business meetings to write things down. He thought that a slave woman did not understand what she was writing down. Pause, he was wrong. What did you understand? Enough to know how trade between nobles works. What schemes they use. Where money goes officially, where unofficially. She looked at him. Do you need this? Very much, Kyer said. The meeting with the group was quiet. Not solemn, the smoldering moon had no tradition of celebrations. People looked at Lyra, she looked at them. Era introduced her shortly. Kyer's sister, document specialist, one of ours. That was enough. Nay examined Lyra professionally, not out of curiosity, out of the habit of checking the condition of every new person. Then told Kyer quietly, physically fine, but there is chronic tension in the back and shoulders, which accumulates over years. Not dangerous, it just speaks about how she lived. At night, Kyer and Lyra sat by a small separate fire. Sena, Lyra said. The first thing she said after a long silence. There is a direction, no exact point. We will find her. Is she alive? I do not know. No information in either direction. While there is no information, I assume the best in search. Lyra nodded, accepted this as a working setting, not as consolation. Father, she asked? Stayed, chose it himself. Gave me the knife and told me to go. Long silence. He broke long ago, Lyra said quietly. Back when Mother died? I saw it. Me too. Are you angry at him? No, I understand him. These are different things. Lyra looked at the fire, then said slowly, like a person formulating something that had long been sitting inside, for 4 years I did one thing. Lived and remembered. Every conversation, every paper, every name. I did not know why. It just seemed that this was the only thing I could do without losing myself completely. Kyer looked at her. Now you know why, now I know. The fire crackled. The moon was smoldering as always, as all this time. As it would be for a long time yet. His name was Rain Solace. A nobleman without an estate. This was a special kind of people in this kingdom. Not poor, not rich, not tied to land, not dependent on one master. Rain Solace worked for those who paid more, and did what others did not know how or did not want to do. Found people who did not want to be found. Count Merrick hired him a month after the story with the transport. Rain Solace was 32 years old. He was tall, lean, with that special appearance that is not remembered, not because it is inexpressive, but because he knew how to make it inexpressive. He could enter any room and leave 10 minutes later in such a way that no one could accurately describe his face. This was a professional skill, developed over years of work. He did not hunt runaway slaves, this was cheap and boring. He hunted people who were building something dangerous for the system. There had been 4 such cases in the last 10 years. All 4 he brought to the end. Count Marok showed him what he had. The testimony of the senior guard about the ambush in Tane Forest, a description of people in guard uniforms, the chemical composition of the substance found in the air by the road. The last was determined by an invited alchemist, and this was the first serious trace. Besides that information about several other disappearances of runaway slaves in 2 counties over the last year. Too neat, too organized to be accidental. Rain Solace took the case and began to think. He thought for 3 days, not collecting information, simply thinking. This was his system. First understand the opponent's logic from what was already known, then test hypotheses. People leave traces not in actions and patterns of actions. A pattern speaks of thinking. Thinking speaks of a person. The pattern of the smoldering moon told him the following. The organization is small, mobile, without a fixed base. Prefers indirect methods, chemistry, documents, deception instead of force. This means either few people or a deliberate limitation of violence. The first operation was clean, no deaths, no unnecessary traces. This is discipline. Discipline means a leader with a cold head. A leader with a cold head who builds such a structure is not an ordinary runaway. This is a person who thinks systematically. Young judging by the speed of the organization's growth, it has a short history, experienced not through education but through observation. Rain Solis wrote down, leader, probably young, man or woman, with an analytical mindset, with sources of information inside noble structures. Do not look for them, look for their sources. This was the right direction. Rain started with the trader of forged documents in Brine. He found him in 2 days not through official channels, but through a network of minor informants he kept in several cities. By that time, the trader had long left Brine, but a trace remained. Several people remembered a young man buying travel permits several years ago. The description was vague, short, dark hair, speaks not like a slave, adult eyes. Rain noted the last description separately. Then the story with Baron Seth's steward. Rain found it after a month of work. The steward once got drunk and blurted out to a servant about some warning. The servant told his wife. The wife a friend. The friend a market trader. The trader hid nothing, she was simply chatting, not understanding the meaning of the words. Rain listened to the trader, paid her a copper coin for the information, and went away to think. The pattern was becoming clearer. The organization worked through coercion without threats. The warning to the steward had been made in such a way that he himself wanted to cooperate. This is subtle. This requires understanding the psychology of a specific person. Someone in this group knows how to read people quickly and accurately. One person or several? Rain leaned toward one. The logic was too unified, the style too consistent. One mind, several executors. He began moving toward Eton. Not because he had a direct trail there, because the pattern of the organization's movements pointed north. Small indirect signs. Several runaway female slaves who had disappeared from estates in a northeastern direction over the last half year. One story about strangers spending the night in a steward's warehouse. A market rumor about people with forged documents in the borderlands. Each separate detail was nothing. Together, a direction. Rayan Solis arrived in Eton a week after Kyre and Lyra had left the city. He came to Deln Crow not as an investigator, as a merchant interested in personnel. Deln Crow received him politely and not especially willingly. They talked about prices, about trade, about nothing specific. Rain looked at the study, at the expression on the owner's face, at the way he moved, and saw a man to whom something had happened recently. Not a catastrophe and unpleasantness. Something forced. I heard a good worker recently left you, Rain said as if in passing. Crow tensed slightly. Barely noticeably, Rain would have been a bad hunter if he had not noticed. Different circumstances, Crow answered neutrally. I understand. It happens in trade. Pause. If it is not a secret, did someone buy her? I did not sell, Crow said, a little sharper than necessary for a neutral answer. Freed her? A pause 1 extra moment long. Circumstances changed, Crow repeated, and changed the subject. Rain did not press. Talked another 20 minutes about wool prices, politely said goodbye, and left. On the street, he stopped by the fountain in the center of the square and thought. Crow had let the worker go not on his own initiative, and not for money. This meant pressure. Pressure without violence, otherwise there would have been rumors in the city. Pressure through information, the only option for a small group without resources. The worker was needed by someone specific. Someone was going after a specific person. Not freeing by accident, purposefully taking. This is personal. Rain Solis began looking for information about Crow's worker, who she was, where from, how she appeared in his house. In 3 days in Eton, he found the trail. A woman from Grai, Count Waldor's estate, taken as a servant 4 years ago. Count Waldor. Count Marok. Different people, different stories, but both in the Eastern Lands. And the organization also operates mainly in the Eastern Lands. Rain Solis wrote down, Grai, Count Waldor. Who else from this settlement? Contact with Duke Sorn happened not according to Kyre's plan. Not according to plan at all. Vera had been working in the laundry of the trading quarter for 4 months already. During this time, she became an invisible part of the space, a washerwoman who is always here, always silent, always doing her own work. People stopped thinking of her as a person capable of understanding conversations. One day she was cleaning in the corridor of a tenement house where one of the minor capital officials rented rooms. In the room opposite, 2 people were talking. The door was not tightly closed. She had been closing it badly for a week already. The hinge had loosened, and Vera each time thought that she needed to tell the owner. Each time she forgot. Today she was glad she forgot. One voice belonged to the official. The second was unfamiliar, quiet, clearly pronouncing words. The conversation was about a group of runaways, about the transport in Tane Forest, about the fact that Count Marok hired a hunter, and about what the second voice called an interesting phenomenon. An organized group with non-standard methods. This is not a riot. This is a structure. Structures live longer than riots. They will find them, the official said. Maybe, the second voice answered, and maybe not. Solace is good, but he searches for what he knows how to search for. If this group works differently than all previous ones, he may miss. Are you interested, Duke? Pause. I am interested in everything unusual, the second voice answered. That is my principle. Vera finished washing the corridor and left. Her hands did not tremble. This was professionalism developed over several months. In the evening, she wrote Kare a message in code. Kare read the message twice, then handed it to Lyra. She had already figured out the code in 2 weeks in the camp. It took her 3 days. Duke Sorn knows about us, Lyra said. Calmly, as a fact, knows something. Does not know who or where. He called us unusual. This is not a compliment and not a threat. This is an assessment. He is observing. Are you afraid of him more than of the hunter? Kare thought for a second. The hunter wants to find and destroy. That is understandable, and one can work with it, not leave traces. Duke Sorn wants to understand. That is more complicated. A person who understood you correctly is dangerous in a different way. Or useful, Lyra said. Kare looked at her. Explain. You said cracks in the system are allies. Duke Sorn does not like 3 counts from the council. He has a conflict of interest with Count Merrick. Merrick owes him lands. He is observing us with interest. That is not an enemy by default. He is a nobleman. Part of the system. Part of the system that wants to reshape the system in its own favor. These are different things. Lyra looked at him evenly. You yourself explained to me last week. Not all nobles hate slaves equally. Some simply do not care, and some view the existing order as an obstacle to their goals. Kare was silent. You are right, he finally said. But that is far ahead. First the hunter. First the hunter, Lyra agreed. But keep the Duke in mind. I am keeping him. Rain arrived in Grai 10 days after Eton. The settlement had almost not changed in the years that had passed. The same houses, the same fields, the same people with the same faces. He came as a minor official checking Count Waldor's property registers. Steward Drog received him with that obsequiousness that small people always show before those whom they consider slightly above themselves. Rain studied the registers. Found Cern's family 3 children, 2 transferred, 1 remained. Asked to speak with Cern. Cern was no longer the man whom Kare had left 4 years ago. He had become even quieter, even smaller. Sat opposite Rain and looked at the floor. Rain knew how to speak with such people, not press offer. He told Cern that he was looking for runaways from these places and that he needed information about his son. Not for punishment, simply to close the register, nothing serious. Cern was silent for a long time, then said, left 4 years ago. Did not say where. How to describe him? Ordinary, Cern said. Short. Dark hair. Pause. Smart. Too smart for these places. Too smart how? Looked at everything as if solving a problem. Since childhood. Cern raised his head and looked at Rain for the first time during the conversation. You will not find him. Why do you think so? Because he does not do what you know how to search for, Cern said quietly, then lowered his head again. Rain left Cern and stood by the road, thinking. Too smart. Looked as if solving a problem. The father had said this, not complaining, with some other intonation. What could have been called pride if the person saying it were still capable of pride. He does not do what you know how to search for. Rain Solace recorded in his memory, this person knows how hunters think. Therefore avoids typical patterns, therefore one must search atypically. He began to think what it meant to search atypically. He is in Grai, Era said. The information was brought by one of the people of the network, a minor trader whom the smoldering moon had once helped with a debt. Spoke with your father. Kare sat with his eyes closed. What could father have said? Nothing concrete. He knows nothing concrete. But said something. Probably, Kare thought. Cern had seen him 4 years ago. Knew only what he had been like at 13 years old. Description short, dark hair, that is half the male population of this kingdom. But the hunter now knew the direction. East, Waldor's estate, a slave's family. That narrowed the circle. We need to move, Kare said. We always move. No, now we need to move differently, split up. One group north, the second west, the third remains as a false trail. He is looking for a single group, we will give him several directions, Era thought. Splitting weakens us? For a month. Then we meet at a point known only to 4. The hunter will lose the trail, he will search for an organization, but find scattered people. Scattered people are not what he needs. And the false trail? Vera. She knows how to be visible when needed. She will leave a trail that looks like a group moving south. Ira looked at him. Risk for Vera. Yes, I will tell her. She will decide herself. She will agree. I know. But she must decide herself. That is the rule. Vera agreed, as Era had said. They parted at dawn quietly without farewells because farewells create noise and noise creates traces. Kare remembered the faces, all 28, plus Lyra, plus Ties. Remembered as he remembered everything, fully, without deliberate effort. He walked with Lyra, Tice, and Era north. 3 days of travel. The new place not a camp, but 2 rented houses in a small town by the Norn River. Kyer rented them through an intermediary who did not know for whom he was renting. Money from the sale of information that Lyra had brought from 4 years in Crow's house. One business secret of one capital merchant was enough for 2 houses and 3 months of life. In the new place, Kyer sat down and began to think about the next step. The hunter was close not physically, but logically. He thought correctly. That meant that sooner or later he would come to the correct answer if he were given enough time. So time could not be given. This was a new logic, not passive, not simply leaving the trail. Active. Make the hunter receive a false answer before he comes to the correct one. Kyer thought about this for 2 days. Lyra sat beside him, worked with papers she had already taken over the documentary part a week into the group. It was natural and right. On the 3rd day, he formulated it. The hunter needs to be given an organization, he said to Lyra. She raised her head. One that does not exist. One that exists but is not us. Legend. Former soldiers discharged after the last campaign. They do small jobs, sometimes free slaves for payment. An ordinary story. There are several such groups in the Eastern lands. The hunter will find them through traces that we leave intentionally. The traces must be convincing enough. 3 details. First, one of our people in Valen tells the right informant about soldiers freeing slaves for money in the East. Second, Vera on her false trail leaves an item characteristic of the military, a buckle, a patch, something recognizable. Third, knows something about former soldiers in the borderlands. They are real people. They really do small dealings. The hunter will find them and it will take time, Lyra thought. This will drag innocent people in, not into a deadly situation. The hunter will check them, make sure they are not it, release them. They will lose time, not lives. Pause. I do not like this decision. But the alternative is worse. Good, Lyra said after a pause. But remember this decision. Not in order to suffer, in order to find a better option next time. Kyer looked at her. You speak like a person who has thought a lot about ethics in bad circumstances. 4 years in the house of a man who sells people as goods and sleeps peacefully at night is a good school of ethics. Lyra answered evenly. Kyer nodded. Remembered. Information about the soldiers came to him through 3 sources almost simultaneously. This in itself should have alerted an experienced person. 3 sources at the same time meant either coincidence or feeding. Rain Solis thought about this and decided, I will check. If it is feeding, I will learn something important about the opponent. If coincidence, I will find the soldiers. He rode east. The soldiers were found after 5 days, real, simple, frightened. They really did sometimes help runaways for money, but they had no organization. Rain spent 3 days on them and released them. But on the way back, he stopped and thought for a long time. 3 sources at the same time. Too neat a coincidence. And the buckle that Vera had left, he found it, studied it, and something about it was wrong. A scratch too fresh, made intentionally to give the appearance of wear. He had been outplayed. Rain Solis sat by the road and felt that rare feeling a professional feels when he meets an equal something between irritation and respect. Someone in this group thought 2 steps ahead. He recorded in memory, the opponent knows how hunters work. The false trail was made correctly 3 sources, a physical item, real people as a foundation. This means experience or exceptional analytical mind. More likely the second. Experience comes from encounters with hunters, and runaway slaves do not have enough of such encounters. Therefore mind. Pure analytical mind without experience, which compensates for the lack of experience with logic. Rain Solis began to move in a new way. He stopped looking for an organization, began looking for a person. In the evening, when Tice was asleep, Lyra was reading by candlelight, and Era was cleaning a knife at the table. Kyer sat by the window and looked at the street. The smoldering moon dispersed, the trail temporarily lost. The hunter ran into a false ending. Lyra is here. Sena direction exists. Point does not. Working. 28 people alive, healthy, doing the work. All of this was true. And nevertheless, something worried him quietly in the background, like a sound you cannot identify. You're thinking about the hunter, Lyra said without looking up from the papers. Yes, what exactly? He is smart. I left 3 sources specially, so it would look convincing. A smart person can see feeding in 3 sources precisely because there are 3. Lyra raised her head. You think he understood? I do not know, but if I were in his place, I would understand. And then what? Then he stops looking for an organization and starts looking for a person. A specific one. The one who thinks exactly like this. Silence in the room. Era stopped cleaning the knife. This changes the situation, she said. Yes, Kyre answered. But not urgently. He has no name, no face, no direct trail. He needs time. Pause. And I have something he does not. What? Lyra asked. Kyre looked at her, then at Era. I know that he is looking for a person. He does not know that I know. The moon outside the window was smoldering, almost hidden by clouds, almost invisible. But it was there, as always. Kyre looked at it and thought about the next step. Final part continuous text, open ending, approximately 2,000 words. Nay found her. Not through documents and not through trade registers, through a healer woman in a small town in the north, who sometimes treated people from the nearest estate of Baron Daler. The healer woman mentioned a young woman with reddish hair who worked at the estate and sometimes came for herbs not for herself, for others. Nay listened and felt how something familiar gathered into a recognizable form. She wrote Kyre one word. Found. The smoldering moon gathered in full for the first time in a month in 2 rented houses by the Norn River, quietly without lights outside. 29 people plus Lyra. Kyre looked at them and thought about how far they all had gone from the places where they had begun. Not in the sense of distance, in the sense of what they had become. He planned the operation for Sena for 3 days. Baron Daler's estate was different, not Merchant Crow with his documentary weakness. Daler was a military nobleman of the old school with guards whom he recruited from former soldiers and kept in discipline. Direct pressure would not work. Nay found no financial weakness. The Baron was not wealthy, but careful without debts. Lyra found the entrance. She spent 3 days working with documents that Vera had brought from her capital connections registers of land disputes. Old and new. Baron Daler had an old territorial conflict with a neighboring nobleman, minor and insignificant. The conflict had dragged on for 8 years, was not resolved, cost both nerves and small money on lawyers. Neither wanted to yield. We resolved the conflict, Lyra said. Daler gets what he wants. In exchange, Sena leaves, officially with a release document. How do we resolve a territorial dispute? Era asked. The neighboring nobleman is in debt to one capital merchant, Lyra answered. This merchant owes a small favor to one of the people of our network. A chain of 3 links. The neighbor receives a recommendation to yield. Daler receives land. We receive Sena. Kyre looked at his sister. You built this in 3 days. For 4 years I saw how Crow built such chains. I simply remembered the principle. Ira quietly said, It is good to have you on the team. Lyra did not answer, only nodded shortly with the expression that Kyre had already learned to read. Not pride, but satisfaction from work done correctly. They were alike in this. The chain worked in 10 days. Baron Daler received a letter from the neighbor with an offer to close the dispute. Agreed immediately. 8 years is a long time. When a week later an intermediary came to him with a request to release one of the workers in exchange for a small additional favor, the Baron was in a good mood and agreed without special questions. Sena left Daler's estate with a document in her hands. Kyre waited for her by the road half a mile from the gates. He did not know what to expect, not physically, but inwardly. He had not seen Lyra for 4 years and found in her almost an equal to himself. Sena was different, younger, a different story, a different estate. He was 21, she was 19. She walked along the road and saw him from far away. Stopped for a second, then walked again, not slower and not faster, with the same gait. When she came close, Kyre saw. Vera had been right when she said that Sena always clenched her fists when she was afraid. Now her hands were open. She looked at him for a long time, then said, You came. Yes. Lyra? Waiting. 2 hours from here. Something in Sena's face changed barely noticeably, like light changes when a cloud moves away. Not tears, not a smile, simply changed. Then let's go, she said. They walked side by side and were silent. Kyre did not hurry to speak. She would say it herself when she was ready. Half an hour later, she said, I knew you would come. Did not know when. Just knew. From where? Because you are like that. Pause. You always looked at everything as a task that could be solved, even when you were small. I thought he would solve this one too. Kyre did not answer. He walked and thought about the fact that she had waited, that Lyra had remembered, that he had built. 3 ways not to break and all 3 different, and all 3 worked. What now? Sena asked. Now you decide yourself, Kyre answered. You can stay with us, You can leave. I have documents and money for the first while. No debt, no obligation. Sena did not think long. I am staying. The hunter found the name 3 weeks after the false trail. Not through a search, through logic. He returned to the beginning. Count Waldor's estate, Gry, Cern's family. Raised all records about runaways from this district for the last 5 years. Kyre from Gry, 13 years old, left 4 years ago. Both sisters transferred to different estates. Father remained. Rain raised descriptions from the guard register standard, short, dark hair. Then found one more record from the town of Brine, a market journal from 3 years before. A young man buying documents matching the description of Kyre from Gry called himself by another name. So he knows how to work with names. So he has several identities. So he thought about this in advance. Rain Solace stood with these papers by the table in a small room of another town and thought that now he knew the following: name, approximate age, appearance, way of thinking. This was not enough to find, but enough to search correctly. He wrote a letter to Count Merrick. There is a trail, the work continues, the result requires time. Count Merrick answered, there is time, there is money. Find him. Rain Solace folded the letter and began moving again. He did not know that on the same day Care received information that the hunter had learned his name. The source was the same minor trader from the network who had accidentally ended up in the right place at the right time. Accidents happened in Care's work. He could not control everything, but he controlled the reaction to accidents. For the first time in a month and a half, the smoldering moon was in full force. 31 people, Lyra, Sena, and one more, whom Nay had brought from the north, a young woman named Tess who knew how to ride better than most noble grooms, had been added to the 28. Kyre looked at them in the evening and thought about the number. 31 is a small army by the standards of an uprising. But the smoldering moon was not an army. It was a tool of another kind, precise, quiet, with a long reach. In 2 years of existence, they had freed 47 people, had sources of information in 3 cities, 2 estates, and 1 capital quarter, knew the financial structure of 4 noble houses, had documents allowing their people to move through 5 counties. It was not much, but it was more than nothing, and more with every month. Kyre stood by the fire and said what he had been thinking in recent days briefly, without speeches, because speeches are for those who need convincing. His people did not need it. The hunter knows my name. This is bad but not fatal. A name without a face and without a place is just a word. We are changing some routes and some contact points. We continue the work. Pause. There is one more thing. Duke Sorn in Valen is observing us. He is an intelligent person with interests that partially coincide with ours. I am thinking about contact. Not now, but thinking. Era looked at him. This is dangerous. Yes, everything we do is dangerous. The only question is the ratio of risk and result. And what is the ratio with Duke Sorn? I do not know yet. That is why I am thinking, not doing. He looked at the others. Questions? Tyus raised his hand, a habit he had apparently picked up somewhere. What about Count Marok's next grain transport? Are we watching? Watching, Kayer answered. Nay, report. Nay reported. Then Vera about the capital, then Lyra about the financial patterns of 3 counts. This became a ritual, a weekly exchange of information. Everyone says their part. Kyre listens and connects the parts into one picture. The picture was incomplete. It was always incomplete. That was normal. You work with what you have and obtain what is missing. Sena sat beside Lyra and was silent. She was silent a lot during the first days, observed. Then one evening she approached Kayer herself and said, I know how to cook food out of nothing, know how to sew, know how to listen to people, so that they do not notice they are being listened to. Where do I go? To Nay, Kyre said. She will teach you the rest. Sena nodded and went to Nay. At night, when the camp slept, Kyre sat alone by the dying fire. 31 people, 47 freed, 5 counties, 1 hunter with his name, 1 duke who is observing, 1 sick king in the capital, 7 counts in the Council of Lords, 3 of whom are in debt and 1 of whom has already lost a grain transport. He thought about how he had begun with a knife behind the rafter and 3 girls in a ravine. Thought about Cern, who stayed in Gry and said, go quickly and do not look back. Thought about Hort, who taught him to read and died from a blow with a sword hilt because he had not bowed quickly enough. Thought about Race Talon's nights in the night over Gry, about the sounds from the village, about the field behind the hill, about the sky above his head. These thoughts were not pain. They were fuel. The difference is important. Era came up and sat beside him. She always felt when he was not sleeping, and sometimes came, sometimes not. Today she came. They sat silently. This was their special skill, to be silent beside each other without awkwardness. "You are thinking about Talon," she said. "Yes, he still lives in Waldor's estate." "I know, you will go after him." "Someday," Kyer said. "Not now. Now is not the time." Pause. I said those words to myself that night in the field. Now is not the time. I did not know then how long I would repeat them. "Long," Era agreed. "But not always." She looked at him. "No, not always." Kyer raised his gaze to the sky. The moon was there, smoldering, incomplete, barely visible behind the clouds. Always there. Always returns after the darkest night. That was what Nay had said at the very beginning, when they were choosing a name. Kyer had then taken it as poetry. Now he thought it was simply a fact. The moon returns. Not because it is beautiful, because it is its nature. He stood up, looked at the dark camp, 31 people sleeping under the open sky or under shelters, alive, breathing, each with their own story and their own skill. "Tomorrow?" Era asked. "Tomorrow the next step," Kyer answered. As always, he went to sleep. The moon burned above the camp quietly, almost invisibly, exactly as it should. The smoldering moon continues to burn. The hunter continues to search. Duke Sorn continues to observe. And somewhere in Count Waldor's estate, Rice Talorn drinks wine and does not know that his name has already been written down, not in a document, not on paper. In the memory of a person who never forgets anything. Not the time yet, but the time will come.